I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing here now. I want to make a bogie wheel for the tail so we can move the airframe around when we get it covered, and we can roll it out of here and take it down to the hangar when we need to without having to pick it up and manhandle it around so much. I got the bogie wheels for the front end done, and they're pretty good. And I had an idea of what I wanted for the back end. I'd figured on using the front wheel off of a bicycle. I had a couple of little children's bicycles that we'd saved got out of the dump, that I was thinking about using one of those so I could use the pivoting up part of the frame, so that where the front wheel goes up through to the handlebars. And there we've got a couple of larger bicycles that were the boys' old bicycles when they were young, and that are kind of in tough shape, and I've saved those. But the boys' bicycles, the full-size bikes, I think they're 20-inch bikes and not 24-inch bikes. But anyway, those are in the back of a truck covered with snow and a whole bunch of other crap piled on top of them, and I can't really get them out. And I can't find the one that we saved out, the child's bicycles that we saved out. Again, they're all piled in snow. And I'm not sure exactly how to go about making this little dolly anyway here. I've got some different options on it, but the first thing I've got to do is make some way to mount it onto the back end there. I've taken that rear portion of the rotisserie off, and I brought my old welding table here, the workmate table, over and stuck it underneath. I suppose that's the first thing I'm going to do, is figure out how to attach it to the fuselage back here. And there is a mount back here, of course, for the tail wheel, and the tail wheel spring comes up and bolts into this big block right here, and then there's a U-bolt that it fits on this pad here, and there's a U-bolt there that holds it on. And I wasn't sure. I thought that there might have been a bend in there, but that they didn't line up perfectly flat and square. Well, when I take this piece of welding rod across there, use that to project out across there, that's pretty much flat across there. So I guess I can use a flat piece of steel there. I've got a couple of options here on wheels for the back. These are the wheels that I used on the front. They're little pushback, they call them Strider wheels for little push bikes. I've got this one here that I can make some kind of a fork and fit it on. I've also got another one of these casters. This is a heavy caster that I used underneath the powder coating cabinet, and that is a pivoting caster there, rolling caster, so that could work. And then I've got these bigger tires and wheels here. These are like off of a cart or something, and that one's kind of got low pressure. That one takes a pretty good sized axle through it. So, but those are my options for wheels for the thing. And then I've dug out a pile of steel here. I've also got this little fork here off of a little tricycle or bicycle, and that might work for that Strider wheel. I'd have to, this has got some plastic plugs in it here that was what the wheel was hooked onto, but if I take those out, I might be able to weld something onto that to put that wheel on there. So anyway, that's what I'm working with so far. Like I said, don't really know what the hell I'm doing, but that's not unusual. That's the way I started out on this project. Well, I think I'm getting this figured out, at least I hope so. I've got this piece of 3-inch angle iron. It's going to be way overkill, most of this stuff, for what I need back there, but it's the material that I have, so it's what I have to work with. Anyway, I've got this piece of 3/8 inch by 3/8 inch angle iron. It's left over from part of the bleachers that we salvaged out of the high school, and it's what I used for the base around that powder coating cabinet. And the end of it here, like this piece, has a hole in it already. That's about a 1/2 inch hole, and it's a 7/16 inch hole in that main lug on that fuselage for that landing gear pad. So that was already in there and it's centered, so I decided to use it. Unfortunately, this piece that was cut off, that was left over, wasn't long enough to use. Oh, I did find some, and I cut off a little longer piece, and I can set that up on there and then mark out and drill holes for that rear pad. There are 2 3/8" holes for that. And I got this piece of tubing here, 2-inch square tubing, and that must be 1/8" wall thickness. It's fairly heavy, but I found it laying there in the scrap bin. So I cut it off at a 20-degree angle. It originally had a 45-degree angle on it, and I think the 45 is too much. I want a little bit of an angle, because if this thing goes straight like this, when that fuselage comes down, it's going to be canted forward. And so if it's back like this, a little bit of an angle, when it comes down, it's going to be more straight up and down. I cut that at 20-degree angle, and I'll weld that in here onto this angle iron. And then I got this fork, this bicycle fork, and as I showed earlier on it, it had some plastic deals in here that I used to mount on it. It's not long enough to use by itself for this little push wheel that I've got. So what I'm going to do, I cut 2 pieces of square, and this is that same stock I used to make those front gear legs. I cut them 6 inches, which may be too long, but I'll take those and flatten them out like I did those other ones there on one end. Just make a pad on one end for them. Mount that wheel there like that. Actually, I think I'll go cut those off a little bit more. That 6 inches is going to be too long. You do half that. So I'll do that. And then I'm going to put this piece here on this section of it, and then this will be able to pivot. And I'll weld this onto here, underneath it, whatever, and then that way this wheel will pivot. I can't get in there to weld it up on the inside, so I'll weld it on out here like this, and I'll probably put some kind of a pad on here, a big washer or something for that to rest on. Anyway, I think that's coming along. I got the rear bogie wheel dolly figured out and put together, and I went through some different design considerations and stuff doing it. I wanted to work around what I've already got, and I found that this 3-inch angle that I had salvaged off of the high school gymnasium bleachers when they tore them down, put new ones in, was just right. The width of it here was just right to fit that upper pad, and it already had a hole in one end of it here for that main bolt hole where the spring attach fitting goes. Now this piece wasn't long enough, so I wound up finding one last piece of this stuff, and I was able to cut off a piece long enough to use. And then I had this 2-inch square tubing, and I cut a piece of it to fit, and I knock off this edge for the inside of the angle on the angle iron so it'd fit up tight against there, and I cut that at a 20-degree angle. I experimented with some different angles. Of course, straight down, when this bogie wheel is going to be shorter than the front ones, and the back of the airplane tapers up, so when it comes down on it, it's going to be down at an angle. If it was straight down, it would have canted forward. So I experimented with some angles. 15 degrees didn't look right, so 20 degrees looked like it was the best angle. So that's what we went with there, and well, that turned out to be still looks like it's pretty good. And then I had that little push bike wheel that I was going to use, and a fork off of an old tricycle that I was going to use for that, and I cut some of this 16 gauge 1-inch box tubing. And then I got to thinking, well, it'd be easier to go ahead and use this big, I think this is a 5-inch, 5x2 5-inch caster wheel here. It's already pivoting, and I could just weld it on there, and that would simplify things a lot. So I went and got a piece of flat 1/8 inch steel. This happens to be 4.5 inches by 4 3/4 inches, and so I cut a piece off that was just a little bigger than this, thinking I would just weld that onto the bottom of this and just bolt this up to it. But this thing must weigh 7 or 8 pounds, maybe more than that. It's pretty doggone heavy, and this wide flat wheel, the roller, works fine in here on the concrete floor and on hard surfaces, but I've got to roll that airplane out and down the driveway, and that's just a gravel driveway and stuff, to get it down to the hangar, and I don't think this would work as well. I don't think it has as much flotation, and then this hard plastic, whatever that finish is on that, urethane or whatever, is going to just dig into the rocks and stuff. So I decided that wasn't going to work. Now this tire here is a nice wide tire. It'd have more flotation, and it's a larger diameter tire, so the rolling resistance would be less. But the hub on this sticks out on one side and it's recessed on the other side, so I could have bolted it somehow up like that with a bolt through it, a rod through it for an axle. But anyway, this is a squishy little tire. These are these cheap Chinese plastic tires. They're not rubber, and well, I don't know. I decided that one's kind of heavy too, which wouldn't have made much difference, but it would have penciled out if I'd have just bolted it right up to that thing there. But I decided not to use that. Well, this is what I come up with. The paint's still wet on it, and I didn't get a good paint job on it. I ran out of paint, hanging it up in the dark and stuff, trying to paint it last night. But this is what I come up with. Instead of using that 2-inch square tubing, I found a thick-walled, I think it's an 1/8 inch thick wall, 14 gauge or something like that, 1-inch square tubing, and so I cut it off 6 inches long, and I cut it at the same 20-degree angle as I did the 2-inch tube. And I found this tube, this post, both these tubes are 7/8 diameter OD, and I had a piece of 1-inch OD 7/8 inch ID tubing that I cut off about, what is that, 3 or 4 inches of that. Actually, I cut 3 pieces of it. I cut 2 small pieces that are approximately 1/2 inch. I welded one of them onto the tube here on the bottom section, and then welded this main tube onto this 1-inch square tubing and slid that post through it and welded a second piece on there. So this pivots in that, it's not a perfect pivot, but it works pretty darn good for what it is. And then I had the 2 pieces of 1-inch 16 gauge tubing here. I cut back, I measured back 2 inches and sliced this wall on both sides, and then measured back 1 inch. I took the Dremel and cut out this little V-notch here and squeezed it together and welded it together for a bolt-on spot. I thought about taking a torch and maybe cutting out this part of this angle here, because it's not really needed in there for strength, and it would have lightened it up. But this is just a temporary thing anyway. It's just going to be on there for a little while. Not meant to be a flying part. Now there's a rear bogie wheel installed, and I just put it on there just to see what it looks like. Just take a picture and gloat.